Hey all, Brian here. Going to read chapter 9 of Priest of Dmon-li, book 3 of the Morcyth Saga. Now where we're picking up at, James, Jiron, and Miko had enemies hot on their tail. They fought them off. They camped on the edge of this lake shore. Some woman came out in a boat from her island, named was Lyria, asked them if they wanted to come over and spend the night in safety. Strangely enough, James said yes, and that's where we're at. So chapter 9. The boat made the crossing in quick time. Sitting a couple hundred feet back from the water's edge was a wooden cabin. A soft light shone from the window next to the front door. At the water's edge was a dock of sorts, and the boat headed straight for it. Jiron took the rope lying in the bottom, and when they neared the dock, jumped out and secured the boat. He held out his hand for Lyria, who took it as she stepped from the boat and received a smile of gratitude. Then he helped James, whose leg made it difficult. Michael hopped out once James was securely on the dock, and then they followed as she led them toward the cabin. "This is my home. You are welcome to stay as long as you like," she said. Coming to the front door, she opened it and preceded them inside. A small home with but 2 rooms, the front living room dining area, and a back bedroom separated by a door. She went to the fireplace and coaxed the coals to life. James and the others took seats at the table. "Why live so far from everyone?" Michael asked. "I like solitude," she explained as she came and took a seat at the table. It provides me quiet for thinking and reflection. I do get a few visitors, but none for some time now." "How did you know we were there?" James gave him an annoying look for asking so many questions. She saw his reaction to Miko and said, "I don't mind questions. After all, how are we to learn if we do not ask?" Turning back to Michael, she said, "I saw your fire." "Do you invite everyone to your home who camps on the shores of your lake?" Jiron asked. "Good heavens, no," she said with a laugh. She gave them each a searching look before continuing. "Actually, I've been waiting for someone." A chill ran down James's back. "Waiting?" She turned her attention to him and said, "Yes." "For whom?" Jiron asked. "For he who bears the star." James glanced to Miko and Jiron, who both returned startled looks of their own. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the medallion bearing the image of the Star of Morcyth. Holding it up, he showed it to her. "I thought as much," she said, nodding her head. "After I felt the power of the spell that had been used earlier, I thought it might be you." "And that was why you invited us here?" Michael asked. "A month ago, I had a dream that a star had fallen from the sky and landed on the shore," she explained. "In my dream, I went and picked it up." Laughing, she said, "That's more or less how it went." "What else did you dream?" James asked, almost holding his breath. "When the star left, it would be bigger than when it had arrived." "What does that mean?" She shrugged, but didn't answer the question. Getting up, she said, "Please make yourselves comfortable. You may rest here in safety. Naught will disturb you." She gestured to a corner where several bedrolls and blankets were neatly stacked. "Thank you," James said, coming to his feet. "You're welcome," she replied. She began to move to the other room when she paused and turned around, saying, "Until morning." "Good night," Michael said as he went. Hang on. Nope. Not until morning, because sleep well. Sleep well. "Good night," Michael said as he went to where the bedrolls were and grabbed one. He rolled his by the fire and lay down. Taking several of the blankets, he settled in and quickly fell asleep. The others got theirs as well. From the other room, they heard her gentle singing through the door, lulling them. Unable to fight off exhaustion any longer, sleep took them. James woke during the night and heard her soft singing coming from outside. Getting up quietly so as not to disturb the others, he went to the window and saw Lyria sitting on an old oak stump. His eyes opened in amazement when he saw little creatures, 3 altogether, sitting before her. Each were barely 5 inches tall. They swayed to the music as she sang. They reminded James of those garden gnomes his grandmother used to have sitting out in her flower bed. They were dressed nothing like them, but the general resemblance was close, without the beards. He moved to the door and opened it as he walked out. As soon as the door opened, the singing stopped, and when he was again able to see her, the little creatures were gone. She turned to look his way and flashed him a gentle smile. "Good evening." Coming to her, he looked around for the little creatures, but they were nowhere to be found. "Where are they?" "Oh, here and there," she told him. but they are extremely shy. What are they? He asked as he came to sit by her. Spirits of the earth, she explained. You are fortunate. Very few have ever seen them. How can I get them to appear? He asked, still looking about. If they want to, they will, she replied, and they rarely want to. They came to you. She gave him that smile again and said, I've been here a long time. They've learned to trust me. I think they like my singing. So do I, he said, before he even realized it. Blushing, he turned his head away and looked out over the lake. Thank you, she said, and then reached out and patted him on the arm. It's peaceful here, he observed when he at last had found his voice. Yes, it is the reason I am here. And then she continued, partly, anyway. Partly, he asked. We needn't go into that now. They sat for a while, enjoying the tranquility of the night, when he said, Have you had any other dreams foretelling the future, like the star falling? Oh, many, she said. Dreams are very important if you know how to interpret them. Do gods ever talk to you? No. I've never known them to talk to anyone but their priests, she told him. And even they don't always understand what they're trying to say. I think I have. Oh, she asked. And what makes you believe that? Ever since coming here, he said, avoiding mentioning where he really came from, there's been this little creature about 4.5 feet tall. He appears and disappears in unusual fashions. And? He asked, prompting him to continue. And, well, he gave me the Star of Morcyth, he explained. Could he be Morcyth? He denies it, though. Shaking her head, she said, I doubt it. Every god has minions who deal with the mortal world. This creature may be one of Morcyth's on this world. But he doesn't act like any I've ever heard of before. When she glanced at him, he continued, he took me to go get pizza. That's a food where I come from. And he took me to a place of fun and amusement that I used to visit as a child. It all seemed rather pointless. I doubt if it was pointless, she said. The gods and their minions never give straightforward directions to those whom they want something. But whatever he has been doing, there is a meaning behind it. Usually, the one who experiences the visitations will understand at the appointed time. But why wouldn't they just come out and say what they want? I don't know, she admitted. But this is the way they work, mostly. What you need to do is think hard about what transpired during each visitation and see if anything had a meaning other than what happened. Take my dream about the falling star, she said. Did it mean a star actually fell? No, it was foretelling your arrival. Why you are here remains unclear, but here you are. The gods see far into the future, and rather the paths that the future may father. Paths? Yes, she replied. Let me explain. Say I wanted you to go from here to my house. If I asked you to, you would turn and go straight there. But if I saw that the result of that would be for you to fall and hurt yourself, then I may not tell you to go there, but arrange through another series of events for you to make it there by another path, a series of events that would enable you to reach your destination without hurting yourself. Does that help you understand? Nodding, he said, I think so. Good, she said. Now, you should try to return to sleep if you can. All right, he said, yawning. I am getting tired again. Will you be all right here alone? Smiling at him, she nodded and said, I shall be fine, but thank you for your concern. James got up and walked back to the house, where he paused by the window again as she resumed her song. He looked out and saw the 3 little creatures once again standing before her in rapt attention. He went to his bedroll and lay down, letting the sound of her voice lull him to sleep. Okay, in that moment, I had no real plan for the Earth Spirits, the little brothers, to be in the book. They were just something I threw in there for the moment. And, you know, Joseph talks about them being like garden gnomes. I don't really have that vision of them anymore, but I like the way it sounds, so I'm going to leave it in there. I don't really think of them as garden gnomes. And originally I had them almost a foot tall, but in later books, especially the one I'm writing now, I mean, they sit on people's shoulders and hold ears, so they're only like about that tall or so. Anyway, there is that, and about a dream about the Star of Morcyth, and about how the one who arrives will leave greater than he arrived. I'm thinking that is more along the lines of greater and knowledge and understanding, because she's dropping some big bombs here that he's not aware of, but will take root in his head, and he needs those in the future. When he woke the following morning, he saw Jiron sitting at the table holding a necklace comprised of beads and hair. As he got up, Jiron turned and waved him over to the table. "Here," he said, as he slid him a note that was lying on the table. Taking the note, he read what was written. "James, take this necklace. It will prove useful in the days ahead. Lyria." He looked around and Jiron said, "She's not here. I looked for her, but she is nowhere on the island. The boat is still here, though." Over on the side table were stacked fruits and roots. "I guess we're supposed to take those with us?" The idea of having something more than meat made his mouth water. "It looks that way," Jiron replied. "They weren't there last night." And then he indicated where 3 jackets and a tunic were lying on another small stand against the wall. James examined the necklace for a moment, a leather string with beads and a 4-inch length of braided hair hanging from the middle. "Wonder what this is for?" Shrugging, Jiron said, "A charm, perhaps?" "I don't think so," replied James. "There's no magic to it." He looked at it for a moment more before putting it into his belt pouch. Glancing over to Michael, who still slept, he said, "Guess we better wake him and get going." Jiron got up and went over, nudging him with his foot. Snapping awake, Michael sat up and looked around, at first disoriented. Then he saw the stacked food on the side table and got up as he made his way over to them. "Is this for us?" he asked, turning slightly towards James. We think so." Taking several other fruits and a couple of roots, he brought them over to the table and commenced eating. He suddenly looked around and asked, "Where is she?" "Don't know," Jiron told him. "She was gone by the time I woke." "Too bad," he said to a mouthful of fruit. "I kind of liked her." Then he noticed the tunic and jackets. Going over to them, he took the tunic and slipped it over his head, glad to have one on again. He'd been bare-chested ever since his old one had been used for James's leg. A perfect fit. Then he took one of the jackets and put it on as well. When he found it was too big, he looked through the other 2 until he came across one that would fit. He brought the other 2 jackets over and handed them to Jiron and James. They tried them out and found the jackets that the jackets fit just fine. Then they had a meal of fruit and roots, and when they were done, cleaned up their mess, leaving the place as neat as they had found it. They discovered a backpack of sorts sitting near the fruit. Placing the fruit inside, James then shouldered it as they headed outside to the boat, still tied to the dock. "Hate leaving without saying goodbye," Michael said as he climbed aboard. "She understands, I'm sure," James assured him. "I hope so. She was nice." Allowing the others to get in first, Jiron then untied the boat from the dock before pushing off and jumping in. They drifted out onto the lake. Jiron took the oars and used them to point the boat in a northerly direction. The mountains on the far shore loomed large above them. They saw where a river emerged from the mountains and flowed into the lake. Deciding that following the river would be the best idea, Jiron aimed the boat so they would come ashore near where it entered the lake. Grounding the boat, they got out, and then Jiron looked at the boat. "How will she get it back?" "I'm sure she'll have little problem with that," James assured him. Mumbled Jiron. As they made their way along the river into the mountains, they were soon grateful for the warm jackets that Lyria had provided. The air coming down from the upper elevations was quite cold in the early morning hours. James wondered how she could have gotten the jacket so fast and in the right sizes. Or did she know more than she let on when they spoke the night before? Regardless, they had to know. They made decent time as they followed the river. The land adjacent to it was not very overgrown with bushes and allowed them to walk with little obstruction. 2 hours after they left the lake, they came to where the river cascaded down a series of waterfalls where the mountains rose abruptly. Jiron went first, ascending alongside the waterfall, using the bushes and trees for handholds and support. Michael went next, with James bringing up the rear. His leg felt much better today after the rest from the night before. The hillside was not seriously steep, and they were able to make it with minimal problems. At the top, they discovered the waterfall was the outflow of another small lake. Several tributaries brought water to it from the surrounding mountains. There was even one small waterfall off to the side. They skirted around the shoreline and jumped across several small tributaries as they made their way to a larger one that entered from the north. It was smaller than the one they had followed after disembarking from the boat. With Jiron still leading the way from the small lake, they followed the stream as it meandered its way deeper into the mountains. They paused around noon for a quick meal. Michael had removed his jacket, the tunic giving him sufficient warmth in the midday sun. Does anyone know where we're going?" he asked. "North," James told him. I doubt if anyone will be able to find us here in the mountains. Let's hope not, Jiron says. If we follow the mountains and stay away from the roads, we may be able to make it a fair ways before trouble finds us again. Finishing their meal, they resumed following the stream. Michael's arms got tired from carrying the crossbow, but he just gritted his teeth and continued on. No matter how tired he got from carrying it, he was not about to lose it. If trouble happened, he wanted to be more help than he had been last time. The sword at his waist, though, that was another matter. It wasn't long before he unhooked the belt and let it fall to the ground. As he walked away from it, Jiron asked, "Are you sure you want to do that?" "I'm no good with it anyway," he explained. "If I use it in a fight, I'd probably just end up killing myself." He heshed with the crossbow and continued, "I'll stick with this for now." Speaking of his crossbow, now, the picture for this chapter that I have up there right now is, that scene, a scene that, of lake, mountain, sunrise, that sort of thing. I worked with the AI generator to create Miko holding a crossbow next to a campfire. I really wanted that picture, but the AI could not do the crossbow. I mean, the crossbow was all kerfuffled. It was like the stock was here and everything was here. It was just, it just couldn't do a crossbow. So I settled for that. I'm thinking that the picture, while I would like them to accurately reflect the storyline, they should at least be eye-catching and interesting, so people who, when it pops up on someone's feed, they'll look at it and say, "Ooh," and then maybe look into it and then go from there and find out where to start the thing. That was my thought. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for that, let me know. But I think that's the way I'm going to go from now. So if the pictures for the chapters don't precisely add up to what I'm reading, I'm going to try to get close or maybe be spot on if I can. But if I can't generate a good, decent, eye-catching image, I'm going to go with something generic that looks good. All right. They continued for the rest of the day, the stream slowly dwindling down to nothing. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they made camp and spent some time accumulating a sufficient supply of wood to last throughout the night. It wasn't going to be cold when it got dark and they needed to be prepared. James brought down a large animal, something like a deer, and they sliced it up. They cooked most of it in order to be able to take some with them the following morning. Eating nothing but roots and fruit was fine for a while, but a man needed meat to keep up his strength. So he goes from complaining about eating too much meat to wanting more stuff. He gets more stuff, now he wants more meat. People just aren't satisfied, are they? They headed out shortly after dawn. The mountains continued to rise in elevation. Michael dreaded more climbing and the cold, but did his best to keep up his mood. He didn't want to become a burden for the others. If the truth be known, he felt he was actually doing better than James, who seemed to be really struggling with it. The day was more of the same as yesterday, trying to find a way through the mountains while still maintaining a northerly direction. Once, they had to backtrack almost 2 hours when Jiron had steered them into a box canyon. They debated whether to attempt to scale the walls of the canyon or backtrack, but quickly realized they were ill-equipped for such a feat and wouldn't be able to make it without serious injury. Their mood was somber as they had to retrace land they thought already behind them. Once out of the box canyon, they picked up what James called the game trail, and the going became easier for a mile or so before the trail disappeared again. That night, they were fortunate to find a cave. Building a roaring fire to keep the cold at bay, they rested and relaxed while the carcass of a small animal roasted on the fire. Michael got credit for bringing this one down. He had spotted it when out collecting firewood and used a crossbow. To everyone's surprise, as well as his own, he hit it. He then had to chase it down since it hadn't been killed outright. He felt part of the group when he brought it back to camp and got the congratulations from everyone. Once dinner was over, they set up a schedule for a watch, and Michael took the first one while the other two slept. The night passed quickly. Another 2 days of trudging through the mountains, everyone had toughened up and the arduous trek was no longer so bad. Even Michael had stopped complaining. James's leg was no longer hurting as badly, just the occasional throbbing. When darkness began to fall on the 5th day since leaving the lake area, they crested a ridge and looked down on a small valley nestled between two peaks. It leveled out for a while before rising on the other side. "Good place to spend the night," James said. Joe nodded and they made their way down to the bottom. As the light faded into twilight, they reached the floor of the little valley and were surprised when they came across a fire ring sitting in the middle of a clearing. "Wonder who was here?" Michael asked, looking around. "Whoever it was, they haven't been here for quite some time," James assured him. "Probably hunters Probably hunters that use this place in the winter. Probably hunters who use this place in the winter. Doesn't really matter, Jiron said. They're not here, and it's a good place for us to camp for the night. Turning to Miko, he said, "Get us some food, Master Hunter." Taking his crossbow, Miko replied, "Sure thing." Then he moved quietly out into the woods looking for dinner. "Think he'll get anything?" Shrugging, Jiron replied, He has the last 2 out of 3 times. He seems to be improving." True. Also, another reason why they send Miko out, though I never really mentioned it, is give him practice with the crossbow, and because it's target practice. So in a tight situation, he might be able to hit someone who's trying to attack them. They got the fire going and had lots of wood stockpiled for the night when they heard Miko crashing through the forest toward them. James smiled at Jiron and said, "He's not going to find anything if he keeps making all that noise." Suddenly, Miko burst out of the trees and ran into camp. "James!" he cried. Jiron was about to make a comment about the great hunter when out of the brush behind Miko emerged a large bear-like creature. A crossbow bolt stuck out of its hindquarters. When it saw them, it let out with a roar and charged. Jiron jumped to his feet, knives in hand, as the bear approached. Miko raced past and then came to a halt at the other side of the camp. He turned and watched James and Jiron as they confronted the beast. James let out with a blast of energy that struck the creature in the side. It didn't even slow. It seemed to make it matter. Jiron stepped backward, not wanting to close with it. His knives would be ineffective against such a brute. Crump! The ground just in front of it erupted and threw it off its stride. A slug flew from James's hand and struck it in the side, lodging against the bone. Damn, this thing was tough. Creating his orb, he tossed it in front of the beast, and caused it to explode in a blinding light. The creature reared back, crying out in fear from all the unexpected attacks, and then fled back into the woods. They heard his cries as it moved farther away. As one, they turned to Miko, who said, "I didn't even see it, I swear." He looked back and forth between them and continued, "I was aiming for a small rabbit. When I fired, it moved and the bolt flew past into some bushes. I guess it was sitting on the other side and got hit. It sat up and roared. Then it saw me and gave chase." They both continued giving him stern glares when suddenly James started chuckling. Then Jiron joined in until they were both laughing. "It's not funny," Miko yelled. "I could have died," which only made them laugh all the harder. When they finally settled down, Miko was quite put out by them and sat down in a huff. "You don't care," he said, dejected. Sobering up, James went over and said, "Of course we care, but the whole situation was just too funny." He couldn't help himself and broke into another smile. "Don't feel bad. It's just that I didn't get anything for dinner," he told him. "That's okay. We still have plenty of meat from last night," he assured him. "And I think there are still some fruit and roots from Lyria's as well." When he saw that they were really not disappointed in him, he smiled a little. They broke out their rations and sat around the fire. There in the mountains, when night falls, it falls fast. It was not long until they were in full-on night with only stars and an almost full moon to give light. They kept the fire going throughout the night in order to keep warm. In the mountains, it got very cold when the sun went down. And that is chapter 9. So not too much happened. I mean, I got a little fun there with Miko and the bear. When I was writing this, my main goal was to follow James throughout the whole thing. And during the Morcyth Saga, I pretty much followed that. And I also wanted to make something interesting in every chapter. I know you've probably heard me say this before, but before I started writing this, I read avidly, and a lot of people, their stuff was just boring. You go chapter and chapter and chapter without either seeing the main character or having anything exciting happen or okay, Wheel of Time. I love the Wheel of Time. The first 3-4 books were just the best fantasy ever written. But then, man, Robert Jordan, he got into soap opera land. And I hardly ever heard of Rand or the other 2 guys. And the story just bogged down with all these different storylines. And when I wrote this, I vowed I would not do that. And I didn't. Unfortunately, Travail of the Darklands, Travail of the Dark Mage, I'm kind of getting away from that. But I'm working to get back to it. Anyway, that is chapter 9. Again, if you have any comments, holler at me. I love discussing things. And if you think you're arguing with me, you're not. Anyway, y'all take care. Like, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. I'll see you tomorrow or the next day for chapter 10. Y'all take care.